The final results right now. But what I do know is that we are ready to keep fighting.
Now, she also did not talk about her Democratic rival, David Crowley, who's been watching these returns all evening long from Milwaukee. And it is those votes in Milwaukee that could hold the key to this race. But there is no doubt that the progressive insurgency movement that many expected to come together in Wisconsin did not happen. A very close contest with David Crowley. Many other candidates in the race actually also impacted this. This has been a wild Wisconsin governor's race. Candidates dropped out of the race. David Crowley did as well. He got back into the race, trying to slow Francesca Hong's candidacy. So these questions of electability that really hung over this race in the end, led by Governor Tony Evers, who was supporting Crowley, and he urged voters to take a very close look at this race. It looks like the voters did look at this race very closely. So this is still a very narrow race. It may not be called until Wednesday.
All right, thanks to Jeff Zeleny as we wait for that counting to continue and potentially a projection. Let's go to our political panel. With me now from Atlanta is political and legal commentator Madeline Somerville. And also joining us is Republican strategist Katie Frost, who's the current chair of the Georgia Republican Party 3rd District. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for staying up late with me.
Thank you for having us.
Madeline, let's start with you. What do the numbers out of Wisconsin tell you about this battle between a Democratic Socialist candidate, Francesca Hong, and her establishment-backed opponent, David Crowley, who, according to the numbers right now, seems to be holding on to that narrow lead?
So I actually expected David Crowley to be coming out better than he is right now. And that's because we had so much chaos with the dropping out, the endorsing, right? I thought that, perhaps people would just have to default to the DSA candidate, but she does have a lot of chaos around her too. So I think that the voters showed us what they were going to do, and it didn't end up making sense in the end.
Crowley just about 3,200 votes ahead. That certainly speaks to that deep division within the party itself. Katie, do you think that division could translate to a possible advantage for Republican Tom Tiffany come November?
Well, it absolutely can when you look at turnout, because if you are a young voter who is inspired by Francesca Hong and you are working hard to get her elected, and then you see what feels like the establishment putting their finger on the scale for David Crowley, getting him back into the race after he's dropped out, Governor Evers going around the state campaigning with him, you're going to feel like, do they even care about my vote? Does my vote matter? Why am I going to show up for them when they did everything they could to keep my candidate from winning? So Crowley's going to have to make sure he gets that base to turn out in the general election. But I got to tell you, this has been a wild year. As someone who loves politics and loves studying all of these primaries, the way some of these candidates have ended up on the ballot, whether it's David Crowley, Troy Jackson, or even Darlene Graham, it's definitely been a fun year to watch.
Yeah, they really are, especially given just the unpredictable nature of one primary after another. And Madeline, for Wisconsin Democrats, just looking into a potential outcome here, I mean, how risky would it be to put Hong against the Republicans in a general election? Or do you think that a best case scenario would include Crowley advancing to November?
So I actually do think that a best case scenario would be Crowley advancing to November, but I think it's extremely risky for Hong to be moving forward, and the Democratic establishment knows that. However, the establishment is going to throw their weight and their funds behind whichever candidate could possibly beat the candidate that's endorsed by Donald Trump. Tom Tiffany is MAGA through and through, and I'm sure that President Trump will be very happy to see him in Congress, in the governor's seat. But here with Francesca Hong in Wisconsin has been one of the deciding states for years for the presidency. And if it turns out that Francesca takes the seat, it might be that the DSA is more powerful than I thought they were.
I mean, that certainly would be one way of looking at it. And we've seen Hong greatly scrutinized for her previous comments. And that is nothing compared to what we would see come November, especially when that midterm approaches. I wonder if we can maybe shift gears, Katie, and talk Minnesota's GOP contest for the race for governor. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, lost his primary. What's your takeaway from this latest loss of a Trump-backed candidate?
I would say Mike Lindell is not your typical Trump-backed candidate. He is someone who is a larger-than-life figure, and he has his own persona completely separate from having that endorsement. So if you want to look at the power of President Trump's endorsement, frankly, Mike Lindell is not the best person to look for that. I would point you to Darlene Graham for the power of President Trump's endorsement. Here we have someone who was appointed just a matter of weeks ago. No one was really very familiar with her, and now she's coming in first against two sitting members of Congress. That speaks to the power of President Trump's endorsement. When you look at Minnesota, everyone knows Mike Lindell. Everyone has an opinion of Mike Lindell. And he was someone who really did not have much of a background in politics. This is his first time trying to run. And people already formed their opinions about him. They are running in his, as of course, a state that leans blue, has swung at different times, but has a tendency to lean blue. So the voters there are going, we need a competitive candidate in the general election, not unlike what Democrats in Wisconsin are feeling about David Crowley versus Francesca Hong.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned South Carolina. If we do have the numbers, let's just check in on what that final tally was when it comes to Darlene Graham leading with a little under 33%, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, we could put those numbers back up of the vote. And this is with support of the president and certainly with the support of the base of her late brother, Senator Lindsey Graham. You see that 32.7% up against Ralph Norman, who trailed 24.6%. Katie, with all those other factors, though, is it surprising to you that number wasn't higher?
Not especially because this is something else that's going to come down to turnout. They just had a primary and a runoff in South Carolina. Now they needed voters to show up a third time. Darlene Graham had $1.8 million spent on her behalf. Ralph Norman, who just come off a statewide run for governor, only had $200,000 spent on his behalf, and he still had a strong show. The real person to watch right here is Russell Fry. What does he do as an endorsement? He clearly wants to be in the Senate. So is he going to look at this and try to decide, does he get behind one of the two candidates? Which one is less likely to serve a long time? He could be a kingmaker here. So that's the thing to watch.
And as you both know, Tuesday also brought the latest sign that President Trump could potentially assert control of the 2026 midterm elections. Let's just briefly play a part of the president's conversation with a conservative host that pitched the idea of declaring a national security emergency. And as you hear there, the president not ruling it out.
If they never get the Save America Act done, you have the right to declare a national security emergency for elections.
Let me just say that stranger things have happened. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Madeline, as an attorney, let me go to you. Would such a move even be constitutional? And what are the legal concerns you have off the bat?
So whenever President Trump makes a legal decision, I expect him to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And that is a strategy that you can move forward with if you want to try to institute something, do something for the first time. And that's what President Trump has done many times, right? Like with his immigration policies or even with the ballroom, right? We're not going to check and see if it's legal. We have a legal theory. We know we have one that we can advance if we move this to the courts and we get challenged. And I think, as you pointed to here, right, he has a legal theory and he wants to move forward with it. But I think that the part that frustrates me the most is that he discredits a judge when he doesn't like the judge's ruling, rather than saying this is or isn't against the law. He doesn't respect the decision. And so I think moving forward, what he will say is this is unsettled law. We don't know how the court's going to feel about this until we give them a chance to. But it's safe for us to expect that no matter what, if they don't agree with him, that he's going to keep challenging it, whether that's in court or in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, well, we saw immediately that this is certainly raising some concerns, to say the least. But nonetheless, we'll see how that pans out. CNN did, by the way, reach out to the White House to try to get a little bit more on the president's position on that. Madeline Somerville, Katie Frost, always grateful to you both for offering your perspectives. Always looking forward to talking to you. Come back again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it is a race against time following the largest earthquake to hit Colombia this decade. Recovery teams, they are looking for victims beneath the rubble, and this after dozens of buildings collapsed in several major cities on Monday. The U.S. says that it has sent a disaster assistance response team to the region, hoping to help support those efforts. And Mexico is currently preparing a large shipment of humanitarian aid, along with 255 specialized search and rescue troops. And these are the images that offer some glimmers of hope. As they continue to emerge, as communities rally in support, you're seeing a woman who was rescued alive after being trapped beneath the rubble for about 36 hours in the debris of a collapsed hotel. And then we want to show you this other amazing video here, a baby being rescued in the hard-hit city of Cali. Earlier, CNN spoke with a volunteer who says that he was led to that specific spot by the whispers of a survivor in the rubble.
It sounded like a whisper. Yes, I'm here. I'm with a baby. But it was like a very soft whisper. So I said, silence, silence. Because the noise from the girl and everything from the people who were there at the moment, who were the neighbors from the area, they all went quiet. Thanks to the cries of the person, the man who was shouting that he was with the baby, I was able to identify where he was. And that's when I started to act. There is a person at home with a baby. Beckham. So they started coming closer. We began moving some very large pieces of rubble, really heavy ones. We started moving debris. There was a piece of the building slab that had fallen quite wide, very large. The 7 of us tried, but on the first attempt, we couldn't lift it. Unity is strength, because no one person alone could have lifted that piece of rubble. It was so large and so heavy. Let's say that at that moment, it was about taking the initiative. And thanks to that, I would say that was the greatest contribution I made, taking the initiative.
And there have now been more than 70 aftershocks since Monday's initial 7.4 magnitude quake. It's estimated that at least 224 people have been killed. CNN Stefano Pozzebon has more on the widespread damage in the region.
We're really seeing scenes of complete chaos coming out of Colombia. The country has been impacted by a 7.4 magnitude earthquake, which is the strongest recorded in over a decade. And among the places most impacted is the international airport in Pereira. You can see travelers seeking cover and running for their lives as the roof was collapsing on top of them. Pereira is a city in the known region of the coffee growing region of Colombia. Another city close by is Manizales, where the clock tower of the cathedral is tilting. The quake lasted for almost a minute, and the damage that was impacted on the church and the surrounding building was significant. This national disaster is already creating an early challenge for the newly sworn-in president, Abelardo del Espriella, who has called for an emergency meeting of the cabinet and for resources to be made available for first responders. He was only sworn in on Friday, and when the quake hit at 7:30 a.m. local on Monday morning, it was meant to be his first day on the job.
Our thanks to Stefano Pozzebon for that, and the Latino community in Miami really stepping up to support those ongoing relief efforts. And you see part of that effort right now. Colombian and Venezuelan volunteers in Miami, they're already organizing some of these shipments for those affected by the disaster.
It hits on for me because Colombia is a country neighbor, and we will always be there for them, like they were here for us when Venezuela earthquake happened. And like I said before, whatever they need, we are going to be there for them because they're like our brothers.
Yeah, Venezuelans all too familiar with the deadly potential of these earthquakes. If you want to help, you can get more information by going to cnn.com/impact. We'll be able to direct you to some of the resources available. And still to come here on CNN Newsroom, we'll have more on how the Secret Service moved President Trump off Air Force One and into another aircraft in Turkey without anyone noticing. Stay with us.